Super wild card weekend continues on in the NFL. We've actually had a change in the schedule because of weather. We only have 2 Sunday games. We will have 2 Monday games. So it ended up being 2 Saturday, 2 Sunday, 2 Monday games. We will discuss all 4 of the remaining super wild card round playoff games right here with Erik and Gino. NFL Betting Blitz presented by Parlay Play. You're also looking at the betting lines from DRF Sportsbook. Erik, buddy, got to give you a shout out. It was a good day for you, for us yesterday overall with some of our best bets with both spots. I think we were both on the Texans side, both on the Chiefs side. Texans money line scored for us. Chiefs -4.5. Chiefs adjusted line was another one that we mentioned. You could even bump them up to 10. The 2 props on Parlay Play that I gave out, Collins went over. And when you're having a good day, Pacheco's last touch got him over 15.5 points. So he ended up with 15.7. So I ended up hitting that parlay. 25 turned into 75. How many times when we've needed a little bit extra, that doesn't happen, right? But some days you're having a good day and it kind of goes that way. So for our football bets yesterday, a lot of them went pretty well. I think you just missed a couple of your props.
Yeah, I mean, I had Njoku touchdown and Cooper over. Missed those, but I had the Chiefs -4 and Kelsey over his prop, which is good. Yeah, CJ Stroud history. First quarterback who's a rookie to beat a number 1 defense in the playoffs. Pretty impressive.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Incredible stuff. And honestly, early in the game, they even left some on the table. Schultz dropped that pass. He overthrew Collins on another one that would have been a touchdown. It was wide open. So even in a game where they dominated, there was still more meat on the bone. They could have been up even more early. So, and you wonder with a team like that now, are you playing with house money? You know,
I'm fading them next round.
Because we'll find out obviously today. But I mean, you're going to go into Baltimore. You're going to go and have to deal with the number 1 seeded Ravens team, but you will be most likely, unless we have a Buffalo loss, right? Right now, we're kind of playing it out like Buffalo's going to win, and we will assume that the Chiefs will probably have to go to Buffalo if that's the case, and then the Texans will have to go to Baltimore. So obviously, they're going to have to play the team that's been best. But the one thing that I will say is all year, Baltimore has been a play with their food kind of a team with, like they've spit out some leads late in games. They've gotten up and they've gotten a little stagnant. Towards the last end of the year, they were beating the crap out of teams, but early on they were messing around. And then you never know with the whole Lamar and this sort of group, we've never seen them make it all the way. And they've got a few weeks off. So you know what? There will be people building a case for them. I think no matter whom they play. And hell yeah, they're in the Elite 8 of the NFL right now with CJ Stroud. So shout out to them.
Props to him, props to Ryan, props to the whole coaching staff. Great position for a young team, and stuff's really going up in Houston. I was a little disappointed with Stefanski. Really didn't understand what he was trying to do with the running scheme. He really didn't.
I agree.
Copy anything that the
Colts did, and they were successful with Taylor.
I don't understand the lack of targets for Amari Cooper. He only had 4 targets going into the fourth quarter, which is very, very weird to me. I understand they're kind of shadowing him with 2, but there's stuff you can do to get away with that. And plus, they're playing the majority of zone coverage.
And it's in a situation like this where, in these types of games, you have to pepper those guys. Yeah, you got to feed your best. You got to absolutely go right at your best. We saw that's what the Texans did with Collins. And then as we transition to the next game a little bit from yesterday, we saw Miami do that early and often. Exactly what we were expecting. A lot of short stuff to Kelsey, Pacheco runs, and then they started getting Rice involved a little bit more. They could have even run the ball more than they did and lean on it there. But a lot of the it almost felt like I was watching a Laker game the other night, and in that one game, and I'm not trying to make it a basketball show or anything, but I'm saying this because as a fan, when you watch your team, you know, Erik, all of the real struggles that the Bucks or the Lions have.
Yeah.
Right. You know, the things that are their weak spots, and some games you'll watch them and other teams will attack them. And then other games, those things don't really come into play. It seemed like for the Dolphins, almost all of the things that we have concerns about with them came into play in that game last night. Almost everything. When they're a little banged up and they don't have everything going for them, what does their offense look like? When Tua doesn't have everything flying on all cylinders, what does their offense look like? In a cold weather game, they looked cold. McDaniels looked like how I looked when I was out in the morning at Santa Anita at the racetrack, and it was like 30 degrees out there. He had his face covered. He had everything covered. I was like, man, these guys are cold. And you could just see that they were cold. And I know it's not it doesn't always have to be this way, but you got Kelsey on the other side who's not even wearing his sleeves. And he didn't have a great game, but he didn't look like the cold was bothering him. And you just saw two teams that felt like they were playing different games at different stadiums. And now, for as bad as your season felt at times, if you were the Chiefs, you're sitting in a spot right now where you're exactly where you thought you'd be. You know, you're back in the final 8 teams in the NFL right now. And you even have a chance to host another home game if the Steelers upset the Bills. So for all the crap that's happened with the Chiefs this year, they're right back where they were. They're experienced. And if you're telling me they can't win a game against the Bills, we've seen them do it, and they could be right back in the conference championship again.
I mean, Kelsey had a great matchup. Pacheco, I mean, what was it? 2.9 yards a carry. There is some worry points with the Chiefs.
And that was a fantastic matchup. The two teams, at least coming into the playoffs, that were reeling the most were probably the Dolphins and the Eagles, right? Coming in, who were not playing well, who were struggling, who were banged up, who looked bad. So I agree with you. The Chiefs aren't perfect, but if you're a fan of the Chiefs, you needed a game like that to feel at least somewhat like we got a shot.
It was a good bounce back. So it's
not perfect.
It is, and they're gonna have to probably more than likely go to Buffalo, which would be an intriguing game. And I'm looking forward to it. Hopefully the Bills can get it done, and hopefully we have a couple good games.
And because you know what would happen too, the Bills, I was reading last night, this would be the first time in playoff history that a team will have a 2-day disadvantage on rest now. Because the Chiefs just played last night. The Bills are going to play on Monday. And then they're going to play each other. They would play each other next week with a 2-day rest disadvantage. And then if the Bills were to win that game, they would likely have another day or two disadvantage the next week. So just something to keep monitoring, because they may be on short rest the next few weeks compared to the teams they're playing. And you know what? When you're at this point, Erik, and you have these really good teams, and there's maybe one or two little small things, those might be the differences.
Yeah, all the small things add up to the big thing at the end of the day.
Yep. So we'll talk a lot more about the teams that have moved on. We know for sure, Chiefs, you're on to the next round. Texans, you're on to the next round. Baltimore, you're safe with your bye. 49ers, you're safe with your bye. 4 more games over the next 2 days. 4 more teams trying to stay alive. Erik, let's start with the Packers at the Cowboys. Dallas is a 7-point favorite in this game. We've seen this number bounce around. It was about 7.5 throughout the week, but I don't think it's ever come under 7. I was lucky enough to get it when it was at 7.5 because I'm on the Packers side. I would have no problem for anyone out there playing this number at +7 if you like the Packers. And I even sprinkled a little bit on the money line here, Erik. I'm looking at this Packers team, and they've had an up and down season, but damn, this is a young team. They are the youngest team in the NFL this year. They are the 5th youngest team in NFL history to make the playoffs since the 1970 merger. And they've been up and down like we expected. Start the season good. You start 2-1. Should have been 3-0. Remember they blew that game to the Falcons when they were up in week 1, 2 scores.
Yeah.
And then they lose 4 in a row. So they're 2-5. Then they win 3 in a row. And that was when they beat the Chiefs and a couple of good teams. And everybody started to say, oh, this team is for real. Then they lose 2 in a row to bad teams and get crushed. And then they win 3 straight to close out their year and to make the playoffs. It was literally up on the roller coaster, down on the roller coaster, back up on the roller coaster, back down. And when you dive into their season, Erik, and you can really break it down, they had a lot of injuries to deal with and a lot of young players that were learning their roles. You've got a quarterback who's really starting for the first time. And I think we saw as the year went on that Matt LaFleur is a very good coach. And I like what he is able to do with this offense. They've made some adjustments over the last couple of games. This offense is the number 4 DVOA since week 10. The number 1 graded quarterback in the NFL since week 11. So we're not talking about 2 games, 8-game sample size. Jordan Love, 20 big-time throws, 7 turnover-worthy plays, 18 touchdowns, 1 interception. They crushed the Bears last week, absolutely crushed them. And they're running the ball better now because Aaron Jones is back. He's healthy. He looks the healthiest he's been all year long with 3 straight 100-yard games. And think about the weapons they have. While they don't have a true, real number 1 receiver, right? I don't think they have one yet that's established themselves. They do have Reed, Wicks, Musgrave, Kraft, Watson, Dobbs, a bunch of different pieces that you feel pretty confident getting all of them involved. And their defense has improved the last 2 weeks. They had a bad stretch of games, and it felt like their defensive coordinator was about to get fired, and they make the playoffs because they only allowed 19 points leading into the playoffs over a 2-game stretch. They were putting more pressure on the quarterback, and I think they will be able to run the ball here, Erik. Dallas is terrible defending the run. They are dead last in defensive rushing success rate. I think Love will be able to attack them down the field. You look at a guy like Bland, he has allowed the worst yards per coverage snap of any corner with at least 250 coverage snaps. And we all know him because he has the pick sixes, but you can target this guy. I think there are spots that Matt LaFleur will target on this Dallas defense. I think Dallas offensively, they don't run the ball very well, and they can have an offense that's not balanced very well. I like this spot for the Packers quite a bit. It just looking at matchups like we did yesterday, and you were pointing this out, the Chiefs had a nice matchup with the Dolphins. You look at the Texans too. Their matchup with the Browns team, a Browns team that didn't play good defense on the road, a Browns team that had some holes in the middle that you could attack, a Browns team that had a weak offensive line because of some issues. Just the way they match up, I like it for the Packers. I think they're going to come into this game, Erik, and play really well. Give me the Packers plus the 7. I locked it in at 7.5. I also locked them in on the money line.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of this Dallas team. I don't think this defense is going to be able to generate stops. They're based on generating pressure, and Jordan Love is one of the best quarterbacks in the league avoiding pressure. He has some of the best footwork, his ability to roll right, throw off his back foot. Also, in terms of defense, I know people are saying, well, they have CeeDee Lamb. I really think that the Packers are just going to double CD, force the other wide receivers to beat them. I know the Packers are bad against the run. However, this running attack of the Cowboys has been lackluster this year. They're obviously missing Zeke Elliott. They only ran for 1,920 yards a season, averaging only 4.1 yards per game. This is their 4.1 yards per carry. This is their lowest total since 2020. For how bad the Packers rush defense are, I think they're going to be able to get some stops on the Cowboys. Now, look at the Packers rushing attack with Aaron Jones. Lions were able to move the ball on them. Bills manhandled him. I think this Cowboys front, as much as everyone wants to hype this defense, you've been able to get stops. They haven't been able to stop the run the last 2 years. And if Aaron Jones is able to run the ball, which we've seen the last 3 games, they're going to have success. I
So
completely.
that's what South Philly Bleeding was asking. The path to beating Dallas at home, they don't really lose at home. I think what we're saying is that they haven't played the most difficult schedule of teams at home. Also, if you look at who they've played, and I think the template is there for what we're saying. Run the ball. Can you establish the run? Because they're not that great stopping the run. Where they've been able to take advantage of people at home is they've gotten up early. And if they're up 14, then you can't run the ball anymore on them. And it's not because they're stopping you, but when you're down big, you just can't keep running the ball. You have to resort to throwing it. And then that's what they've done to teams. They've put these teams in tough spots to where then Dallas can put all the pressure on you, force you to throw it, and then you make a mistake and Bland gets a pick six. That's what we've seen from them this year. But you just got to slow the game down, right? And then you can't make it as into it. You can't give them the opportunities to have those turnovers and those big flip plays. You slow it down. You hand it to Jones early on. You kind of take the crowd out of it. And then you can dial up some big plays for Love, right? You kind of bait them in. You slow them down. And then this guy, he doesn't need to be down the field every single play. I don't want them necessarily looking like the Texans were yesterday. I don't know if that would work for them. I think you need to set it up here with the run, then you hit him in the mouth.
Yeah. Also, another thing, Dak, when linked 7 points or more, I know is 20-10 ATS. But when you take the Commanders and the Giants out of it, he's only 7-5-1. Dak in the playoffs is 1-5-1. We talked about LaFleur. I really don't think LaFleur gets enough credit. This is the first team since 2010 to make the playoffs with no all pros. The only teams that didn't have any pro bowlers were the Commanders, the Patriots, and the Panthers. The three worst teams in the league, along with the Packers. So you got to give LaFleur some credit. I think they have the coaching advantage. I think they're going to be able to scheme some stuff. I think they're going to have success running the ball, and Love's going to be able to avoid the pressure. I played the Packers plus the 7.5, and I also played the money line. I found plus 292. Gino, I can't hear you, my man.
Over at Parlay Play, 2 of my props for today did come in this game. I played Aaron Jones over 15.5 fantasy points and CeeDee Lamb over 21 fantasy points, because I do think that is a spot that Dallas will be able to target, the middle of that defense. And I do think it could be a big Lamb game, but I feel like this should be one of these situations where not that you let Lamb get his. Lamb is talented enough to where he's still going to get most of his. I think you can do everything you can, and he's one of the best receivers. But if you stop their run, you don't let them run on you, and you just sort of like in basketball, hey, you let this guy get 30, but you don't want them to have 20, 10, and 10, right? Get everybody else involved, and that's when it's worse. I think that's sort of what you do here with Lamb. Maybe he gets his, and that's it. So I'm Lamb. I think Jones has a good game here, but we're both on the Packers side. Erik, anything else you want to mention on this game?
No, I would look at Jones's props for sure. Also, wouldn't surprise me if Watson gets in the end zone. So look at a Watson touchdown prop.
Remember, if you're in the state of Iowa and you are looking to play these games, DRF Sportsbook, you can sign up for a wagering account. Use our promo code. It's scrolling across the bottom of the screen right there. FAST300. It'll give you a $300 deposit match bonus and a $50 credit free bet. Good luck. Packers, Cowboys, we're both on the Packers side. Man, what a tough game in the Rams and the Lions. I'm a Rams fan. Erik's a Lions fan. And both of these two teams have had fantastic years. The Rams were not supposed to be good. They've won 7 out of their last 8 games, and their only loss in that stretch came in an overtime loss to the best team in the league at Baltimore. And Baltimore had to run a punt back in overtime. Otherwise, the Rams are still in that game. Now, when you've got McVay, Stafford, Donald, Kupp, Nakua, Kyron Williams, this team has some top-tier talent. They have some real legitimate talent at good spots. They have a talented head coach who's taken them all the way there. They have a quarterback who has led them. Stafford is having one of his best years ever. He's limiting the turnover-worthy plays. Him and McVay, you just can tell that these guys get along well. right? They know each other. McVay knows the strengths of Stafford. And they're going to come into this game, and they're actually going to know some of the strengths and weaknesses of Goff, as I think will the Lions with Stafford. This should just be a fascinating game. We've got the Rams and Stafford back at Ford Field. He never played a playoff game there in 12 years with the Lions. And now this Lions team, when they have their group of offensive players that I was just mentioning, they're one of the top 3 offenses in the league by all metrics. This has been a team that's balanced because you've got a couple receivers you can hit. You've got a running back. You've got a quarterback that makes good decisions and that can pinpoint throws down the field. I think this is the game of the weekend to me, where I worry about the Rams as a fan of the Rams, as someone who's watched all of them. Their special teams is awful. If they're in a close game, that could really hurt them. They rank 32nd in special teams DVOA. They made a kicker change before week 18, and Maher, who they brought back in, missed an extra point. They've missed 16 kicks this year between field goals and extra points. So that's one a game they're missing. Yeah. That's crazy. They've allowed almost 500 punt return yards this year, 2 returns for touchdowns. So think about these 2 spots throughout the year. Against Baltimore, they're playing this awesome game. They're in overtime. Baltimore runs a punt back. You lose because of special teams. How about against the Giants a few weeks ago? In the fourth quarter alone, the Rams missed 2 extra points and then allowed the Giants to have a 94-yard punt return in the fourth quarter. And they should have lost that game. The only reason why they won is because the Giants missed a field goal that would have won the game. So as a fan, Erik, for the Rams, while they've done a fantastic job this year offensively, I think their defense is fine. It's not great, but it's not horrible. It's not a sieve defense that you people go up and down on. My biggest concern for them are the special teams. If they miss a kick, if the Lions run get great field position, running a punt back, or getting a good kick return, those are things that the Rams, they're not good enough to overcome. Yeah. Right? They're good enough to beat anyone if things all go well for them, but they are not good enough to have 3 or 4 different things go wrong and still win that game. Against a good team like your Lions, this is just the second ever 12-win season for the Lions. They're legitimately a good team. They're the number 7 team in DVOA overall, the number 5 offense, the number 13 defense. Laporta, though, that's going to hurt, right? Because that was a big part of the offense.
He's trending like he's going to play.
And so that's what Campbell's been saying all week. And I guess if he's out there, he can even be used as like a decoy in some situations, right? Because you're going to have to give him some attention. You just hope that he is physically ready to go because, man.
Well, he's such a big part. I mean, he's second in third down receptions. I mean, not having him there, and you kind of hit the nail on the head. Even if he's not 100%, just having him there, the Rams have to respect him being there. That's kind of my worry point in this game with not having Laporta there. And it's kind of crazy when you think I'm saying that about a first-year tight end, but he's so big in their third down stuff. Not having him out there is huge for this Lions offense.
So we're going through some of the chat, some of the comments in the chat. Shout out to I Hate the Lakers. Let's make some money. Bobby Thomas out there. South Philly bleeding. And South Philly was talking about some of the plays that he had. Wicks there.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great play. That's why I kind of think Watson gets a touchdown because of the amount of man coverage that the Cowboys play. I like that. I like that bet a lot. And then also Wicks is kind of morphed into the wide receiver 2 there.
Yeah, he has.
Jalen Reed. So I like that bet a lot.
Others, the Rams money line, lock it in from Sports Better. This one says Rams, Packers, Bucks round robin there on the money line. How about that one? Let's get to some of the other comments before we pick back up. We've got boxing match. Lots of personal stuff between the Rams and the Lions. Kind of feels like a heavyweight fight. You've got the drama on the field and off the field. This one says 0 chance the Packers win. Will cover, won't win. Okay. But that's the thing, if you feel strongly enough about them that you like how we did, we handicapped this game, finding reasons that we think the Packers can keep it really competitive. Man, I always want to sprinkle a little on a plus 300 money line in that situation. Right.
Oh yeah.
Because we're not necessarily looking at it like, it's a double-digit point spread. Can the Packers get some garbage score late? I think they match up pretty well in that game. So whenever I feel that way, I always want to take a little sprinkle. Others, Rams special teams are bad. It will cost them. Yeah. I as a fan, that is the most concerning thing, their special teams. One more, take the Williams under 82.5. The Lions are second in the league with 88 point yards per game allowed, only second to the Bears at 86.4.
One
so
DVOA defending the run.
Yeah.
But when you look at Kyron Williams, when you look at what he did against the Browns, who are top 10 DVOA as well, and against the the Ravens, both those games, Williams averaged over 4 yards a carry. So if the Rams do have a shot in this game, they're going to be hit. I mean, they're going to need to run the ball, but let's be honest. I mean, I take that comment back. With how bad the Lions back four is defending, I think this is going to come down to whoever has the ball last.
Me too.
In terms of this game, let's look at the quarterbacks the Lions have played. Nick Mullins, 396, 2 touchdowns. Zach Prescott, 345, 2 touchdowns. Nick Mullins, 411, 2 touchdowns. Quarterbacks are averaging 384 yards per game, 2 touchdowns per game their last 3 games. Nick Mullins had not one but 2 games where he threw for over 390 yards against this Lions defense. And the Lions back four, who do they have that is going to be able to stop Kupp and Puka? They don't have anyone.
No.
Kupp lines up 60% of his routes in the slot. Lions gave up the 5th most yards per game to opposing slot wide receivers. Second in touchdowns. You're playing DFS. Cooper Kupp's obviously the way to go. I got over, I think, 67.5 yards in the receiving game for him. I would play that up to 72. I think Stafford is going to target him because that's who he has a relationship with. That's who he won the Super Bowl with. That's who he's comfortable with. Puka will be the second guy here. I like his over. I like the Rams here plus the 3.5. McVay 3-1 ATS on the road in the playoffs, 3-2 as a dog. Also, like, we're talking about boxing matches and everything. Why are the Lions banning Matt Stafford jerseys in Detroit? Makes absolute zero sense.
You would almost want it to be the opposite, right? There should be a moment before the game where you kind of take the moment back and you introduce him and say, hey, let's welcome Matt Stafford back here. Great Lion. It's like you get it out of the way. Everybody cheers for him, and then you can boo him.
Yeah, like do like the little tribute video, whatever, and then just move on.
And then you got a game to play. Because now there's this like weird energy. Somebody sneaking in a Stafford jersey. You know what I mean? It's like, who cares? That's something that shouldn't be a part of this at all. I agree with you. And I do think, for the same that you were saying about Kupp, I think St. Brown is also going to be able to have a big game here. He's someone that they've always targeted. They've always focused. You have a little bit less Laporta here. And I think for the very same reason that you said with Stafford, if you're Goff and you go down today, you want to go down with St. Brown, who is your guy and is one of the best wide receivers in the league that people still don't really put up in that best wide receiver conversation. He's that good. He really, really is. So I think it's a big game for him. On parlay play, I did just what you said with Kupp. I went over with Kupp, and I'm going to do the same thing with Amon-Ra. I think both of them have these games in here that are big, big games. Yeah, at 3, the number feels right.
Yeah,
I can see you wanting to play it either way. At 3.5, I'm in on the Rams for sure. If it was 2.5, I'd go to the Lions. It's that type of game for me, to where I really feel like the number is the key to how you play this thing. If you're not feeling like there's an advantage on the number one way or the other, maybe you wait, you play in game, you play a parlay play prop like I am doing with Kupp over 15.5 fantasy points, or you can go over the receiving yards like Erik suggested. How about all 4 quarterbacks today for 2+ touchdowns? Okay.
I mean, the one thing with that is the Lions, once again, the 5, once they get inside the 8, are just ground and pound trying to get in with Montgomery or
And I could even see that being a Jones thing too, right? That's
that
my
could
only
be
concern.
but
Jones and Gibbs and Montgomery.
I mean, like the thing is like I would take if it was like what Love, Dak, and Stafford. I like it. Out of that, the quarterbacks I don't like the most are Goff just because of the rushing attack.
Yep, good point. Let's get to Monday. Monday football, Monday day football. This is a game that was postponed. If you saw some of the weather yesterday at Pittsburgh and at Buffalo, it's not only the cold, Eric, because we've had games played in cold. It was the wind on top of the cold to where you could not see anything. It was like a swirling vortex on the field. So they end up postponing this game 2 days and they move it back. As we get into this game on Monday, do you have a first-time touchdown scorer for this game, Eric, or backtracking? We had some people in the chat ask us for either of the last games. Do you have a first-time TD?
Yeah, I'd go Cooper Kupp. Cooper Kupp, he's 10-1. I would definitely take him. Lions give up the second most touchdowns to a slot wide receivers. And he was second in the team in red zone targets when only playing 12 games. So I would go with Cooper Kupp if I were to play a first touchdown. Anything over 10-1. 10-1 would be my.
There's also a no travel alert that started, I believe, last night.
Yeah.
I think that they said Bills can't afford to lose to racist Rudolph. I posted a joke yesterday that said, Eric, I couldn't remember a year where we had as many of these backup quarterbacks have like a 2 or 3 week stretch where they were like the center of attention. You know, they had everything going for them. So just this year alone, we've had Josh Dobbs, the Pastronaut. He had a few weeks. But you were telling us, no, it's not going to be long. It's not going to last long. After that, we had Tommy DeVito Cutlets. He had a few weeks. Then he came crashing back down to earth. We had Secret Bagent Man. He really only had about a week, Tyson Bagent. He heard about it all week. Then on Monday Night Football, he got destroyed. We had bitter Jake Browning. He had a few good weeks. Didn't play well against the Steelers. We had Old Man Flacco. Everything came crushing down yesterday. And then we've got Rudolph, the third string quarterback. Is he going to be the next one where it all comes crashing down for Rudolph? Because then one foggy Christmas Eve on Buffalo. I feel like there's something there I could do with the Rudolph song, Eric, and the weather and everything. But I feel like Rudolph played 2 good games. His last game, he did not, but they were still able to win. They played against the Baltimore team who was sitting a lot of their starters. This is going to be a really difficult game for him with the conditions, with everything. Now, all that being said, this game is 10 in a bad weather game where both of these teams might have trouble moving the ball. And Buffalo, for as good as they've been down the stretch, they're 7-1 at home. They were only 4-4 ATS at home in their 8 games. So this is a game where even without Watt, where they've struggled without Watt, no doubt about it, Pittsburgh could be down by 16 and get a garbage time score to cover this game. Like, I'm not laying this number with Buffalo. Did the 10 get you to buy in on playing the Steelers here?
No, I want nothing to do in terms of side. I went to a player prop in this one. I did James Cook. I took his over. Steelers are allowing 96.4 rushing yards per game. That's the most amongst playoff teams. You look at the last 3 running backs they've played. Edwards, 4.8 yards per carry. Walker, 5.3. Mixon, 3.9. Since the OC change, Cook, his carries have gone from 12 a game to 17 a game. His yards per game have gone from 61.4 to 72.6. So I think this is going to be a run-heavy game, even though the weather is going to be better. It's still going to be cold, still going to be windy on Monday. With the weather report, there's even talks now they may try to push it back one more game with how bad the weather is. So there's still going to be this ground and pound type thing. This has been an offensive that relies on the run since Brady has taken over. So I love James Cook over his rushing prop. I believe I got 65. and a half over there. Yes, over 65 and a half. I absolutely love that. And then I also played Warren over 17.5 receiving yards. I think the Steelers are going to get behind the 8 ball. I think they're going to be forced to throw the ball because they're going to.
And it's got to be short stuff. It's not going to be long.
Warren is going to be the guy that they look to lean on in the passing game. Bills give up the most yards per game to opposing running backs in the passing game of teams left in the playoffs. I believe it was the 5th or 6th most for the year. So I'll take Warren over 17.5 receiving yards and Cook over 65.5 rushing yards.
Steelers at the Bills. Cook, as you pointed out, 20 touches over the last 4 weeks. He's just been getting the ball more and more and more. Some of our comments, like the quarterbacks that we were talking about, Dobbs, so bad. And we saw this one twice, though. Jake has a smoke show. Jake is winning off the field. So shout out to Browning because he's gotten a lot. Browning's significant other is popular in the chat here. Jersey Joe had a reality check. Yeah. And we mentioned 1 in 10 straight up with no Watt. Do we know the health with another day? Do we know the health of Gabe Davis? Does that mean he can maybe get into the mix? I wonder.
I don't think
so keep an eye on him if you're trying to play any Davis stuff, because as of now, I don't think he's going to play.
Out. He's out.
Steelers, Bills, a 10-point spread. So Buffalo right now, they're the number 2 seed. Buffalo wins. They will host a game at home next week against Kansas City. If Buffalo loses, that means Pittsburgh will go and play their rival, the Baltimore Ravens, in Baltimore. And that means the Texans and CJ Stroud, they'll head on over and play in Kansas City against Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs. That would be fun, huh? Stroud versus Mahomes, kind of the quarterback. That'd be a real blast right there. And then you'd get.
And it would be the thing, like everything lines up perfectly for Kansas City and their little.
It would. You're right. That would be a perfect thing. You have a Steelers team going to play their rival Ravens, and you could see something weird happening in that game, right? Where the Steelers keep it close, something weird happens, there's a turnover or two, and then all of a sudden, what? The Chiefs are hosting again against the Steelers? Huh? It's amazing.
Oh my God. The Steelers made it that far.
Right? And then, yeah.
I mean, that would be
Tomlin. That would be Tomlin. That's one guy that you can say he's gotten the job done in the regular season, but not as much in the playoffs recently. Remember, they have not won a playoff game since 2016. So for all the regular season success they have had, they haven't had the real playoff success recently. Steelers, Bills move to Monday. Let's talk about the Monday night football game now. We've got the Eagles at the Bucks. Eagles are favored in here, even after the miserable end of the season that they had. They lose 5 of their last 6 games. The last 2 were against Arizona and the Giants. Absolutely no excuses in losing those games. The 6th team in NFL history to enter the playoffs having lost 5 of their last 6. They trailed for more game time during those 6 games than they did in the first 12. Now, we have seen a team go 1-5 in their last 6, make the playoffs, and win a playoff game. The Dolphins in 99 did exactly what the Eagles are trying to do, but you always point this out. You can win a game or 2, but after winning that first game, the Dolphins lost 62-7 in the next round of the playoffs. So you can't really fake it all that much against good teams. In this spot, though, I do think the Eagles are going to be able to play well. We don't even know if Baker can play right now. His ribs are banged up. Baker's been he's going to play because I would bet on Baker playing because he's a tough dude. If there was one thing I would bet with Baker, it wouldn't even be that he would complete a pass to a particular player. Baker's tough, no matter what, like him or not. The guy's a tough dude. I just don't think with his health, the way Tampa played their last couple of weeks, they didn't play well. They got the crap kicked out of them against the Saints. They beat the Panthers 9-0. Now, for Tampa, it's a great spot. Of all the teams in the playoffs, you get to host a home game against a team that's lost 5 out of 6 and is really, really struggling. But I think for Tampa, it was one of those things that just getting here was kind of their Super Bowl. Just making it to the playoffs was a big deal for a team that we thought was going to be one of the worst teams in the league this year. I say we, the over-under, and the public, thought that this team was going to be better than they were. I'm not sure. I can't get a feel for which side to play. With a healthy Baker, if he would have looked as good the last 2 weeks as he did for that 3 or 4 week stretch when they went on a 4-game win streak, and that just flipped their whole season. Weeks 13 through 16, during that stretch, they averaged 28.5 points per game. They only allowed 18.5 points per game. And Baker had 9 touchdowns and 1 interception. So they were beating teams in a 4-game stretch by 10 points per game. And Baker was awesome. Can we get that version of them here? I don't know if he's not healthy. That's the problem. He's got to be healthy. Their defense, I think, is a little banged up. For the other games where I like the matchups, I don't know on this one if I like it quite as much for Tampa. I'm certainly not laying it with Philly, but this is one of the games where I couldn't get as good of a real feel for. Do you have a strong play here?
First of all, I want to ask the South Philly guy in the chat, do the Eagles make a coaching change if they lose this game? That's my question. Do they move on from Sirianni, get Belichick, Vrabel, whoever?
Because you've got right now, if you lose this week, you've got Belichick, Vrabel, a Pete Carroll. I know, who knows but there's big names out there right now that you could go get, bring in, right? Yeah, right. Saban, go get them, bring them in right now. And they would probably help your veteran team. I think it depends on how you lose, right? If they get beat up, I think he's done. Let's say they lose by double digits and it's not a close game to where Tampa's controlling the game throughout. They're turning the ball over. They look poorly. Yeah, I think so. I think if they win, he's safe.
Yeah. In terms of this game, first of all, my first prop that I want to look at is Cade Otton. If Baker is going, I will look to play that just because the Eagles do struggle covering the tight end. So I'll look at Cade Otton's receiving yard prop. So I'll look to play that, but that is hinging on if Baker plays. In terms of this game, look, I'm going to go Devontae Smith. I'm taking his over of 64.5 receiving yards just because Tampa is awful in the back four. They give up the second most yards per game to opposing wide receivers. With no AJ Brown, Smith is going to be the focal point of this passing attack. They're going to key in on him. He's going to see 12 to 15 targets a game. So I like Smith over the 64.5 receiving yards. I misspoke. The Bucs give up the 4th most yards per game, to opposing wide receivers. And in terms of this game, look, I like this Eagles team. And I think it's going to come down to the trenches. I think when I look at their offensive line against the defensive line of the Bucs, they have a huge advantage. They're going to be able to protect Jalen Hurts. And then when I look at the Bucs offensive line against the Eagles defensive line, I think the Eagles are going to be able to generate pressure. And with Mayfield's bummed ankle, I don't think he's going to be able to avoid the pressure. Then they're going to be able to lean on this run game once they get a lead and just wear out the clock. I was able to get Philly minus the 2.5. I like that right there. It's there on DRF, so I'd still play Philly here minus the 2.5. If it gets to 3, though, I wouldn't do it.
And our guy from Philly said, absolutely, you have to. Laurie, don't play with being embarrassed. And that's the key, right? Perception does matter. It's not always that you lose. It's how you lose. God, I tell myself this as a gambler, right? Because we're all going to lose. Everyone's going to lose almost half of the time in gambling. Even the greatest are going to lose almost half the time. But it's the how you lose, those bad ones, those ones that sting. They're like when I'm watching a horse race and a horse jumps the rail or my horse gets stuck up the inside when no doubt he's the best. It's the how you lose that sting. If you lose this game and you get beat up and you get embarrassed and your last 2 months of the season, you looked like one of the worst teams in the league. I mean, this secondary so far, this secondary is one of the worst by EPA per play and by success rate. Not only the secondary, they're the worst defense of any teams in the playoffs based on the advanced metrics. They were number 29 in defensive DVOA, number 29 against the pass. Since week 9, they're 31st in defensive EPA per play. And I one thing I've learned from you and also what I like to do myself is all of these numbers or all of these stats and especially the advanced metrics, they all have kind of holes in them. None of them are perfect, right? They're, like DVOA doesn't take into account sometimes injuries or weather or things like that, right? So there are holes there. They don't take into account some like luck metrics that happen with certain things. And I think the same can be said for player grading with PFF, for the way they grade everything. There are certain holes there with the way some players get graded. Same thing with EPA, stuff like that. You know, you look at EPA per play, and then you sometimes you need EPA and success rate together to get a good look at how a team is, because their EPA might be great because they've gotten a few turnovers, but their success rate isn't as good. So I like looking at all of them together. And when you look at EPA and DVOA and the grading and the success rate, they all tell you that the Eagles secondary is bad. All of them. There's nothing fluky about it, you know?
Yeah, their secondary is really bad. If Baker was 100%, I'd be betting Mike Evans over his props. One thing, there is some possible weather concerns, so we got to watch that out too. If this is weather concerns and it becomes a running game, I mean, that hugely favors Philly just because the Bucks were one of the worst teams running the ball this year in the NFL and really don't have that lead back. I know Rashard White led me to a fantasy football title, but he's just not that lead back where he can rush the ball 25, 28 times and you can just really lean on him. Plus, their offensive line isn't that good.
Erik, let's get through a couple more of these comments. Crazy to think about, like last year, would we talking about the Eagles coach getting fired? How about if you played the Eagles over 11.5 this year and they were 10-1? They were 10-1 to start the season. How are you not cashing that ticket? That's a bad beat. That's a bad beat.
That's a brutal beat.
That's a bad one. I hear and I'll see now, because sports gambling is becoming so much more mainstream. We'll see a lot of the times people on accounts say, "Oh, that was a bad beat," in a game where a team was like never even covering. You know, like I don't like the term bad beat a lot because there are things that it's like, no, that's just a loss. That's just a normal loss. That wasn't a bad beat. That's a terrible beat when you're at 10-1 and you don't get over 12.
Absolutely brutal.
That's nasty. Agree. If they lose, he's out. You go get Belichick, shore up the linebackers and DBs. That's what's hurting the Eagles. The middle of the defense, I completely agree. Plus, you get rid of Johnson, hire Arthur Smith. He'll give the ball to Swift and lean on him more, which they should be doing. It's funny because I think the consensus right now would be really negative on Arthur Smith. But I honestly, especially because we saw him and that's how he didn't do well with Bijan and some of those guys. He was a good coordinator. And a lot of times for guys like that, being a head coach is just too much. And I think for him, watching the way he handled like the press conferences and losses, he didn't seem like a guy who I wanted as a head coach. As a coordinator, might be completely different when he's not the end all be all, the buck stops here guy, when he still has to answer to people. Right. I think that's a better situation for him.
Yeah. He's a coordinator like, oh my God, the Chiefs DC, like Vic Fangio. Some of these guys are just coordinators. There's nothing wrong with that.
It's a great point. Even Quinn, who's had some success, and they talk about him maybe being a head coach again. You know, I heard Seattle in the mix for him. Some of these guys, and they're fantastic coordinators, but all of the responsibilities that you have as a head coach, man, there's a lot of BS in there. There's a lot of like meetings, kissing people's butts, showing up for promotional events, doing stuff that has nothing to do with coaching, you know? And that's where guys like Arthur Smith get into some trouble. Windows close fast in the NFL. They do. They really, really do. And then they can open fast. Look what just happened with the Texans in 1 year. You get the right people, the right players in the right spot with the way that the divisions are and the way that the schedule is in the NFL. You know, you come off a last place year, you get a softer division, boom, 1 year, it flips everything. And yeah, it's a good point. He did a great job with the Titans, and A.J. Brown likes him. That's something to note, too, with A.J. Brown out. I believe they've already announced that.
Yeah, he's not playing.
Is there anyone else on the Eagles you would maybe target or you think will take advantage of that?
I like Devontae Smith. I got his receiving prop at 64.5. Philly bleeding in the chat mentioned Julio Jones TD. That's probably a pretty juiced up one. I would maybe look at that as well.
Erik, round 1, the super wild card round. Our previews are finished up, folks. You're going to have 4 games coming over the next 2 days, and we will know what those 8 spots look like. We already had 2 qualify yesterday, 2 buys, and 4 more teams coming over the next few days. Erik and I will be here with you next week to get you all set up for the divisional round. Remember, if you're in the state of Iowa, sign up right now for a DRF Sportsbook betting account. Erik, over on Parlay Play, I turned my $25 into $75 yesterday, so I'm pretty pumped with that parlay. Today, I put in 4 props that I'm playing, and I've kind of been mentioning this. With some of these players that I'm targeting, I like playing the fantasy points over because I think that gives you a combination of catches, yards, and touchdown, and scoring. So the plays that I had today are Aaron Jones, more than 15.5 fantasy points. CeeDee Lamb, more than 21 fantasy points. Cooper Kupp, 15.5 fantasy points. And Amon-Ra St. Brown, 19.5. I'm leaning on a lot of the big premier receivers, and then Aaron Jones being able to attack that Dallas run defense that isn't fantastic. How about for you?
I did Cooper Kupp over 73.5 receiving yards, and then along with you, Aaron Jones over the 15.5 fantasy points.
Folks, really appreciate all of you hanging out with us in the chat this morning. I hate the Lakers. Let's make some money. South Philly bleeding. Cool Kev out there. Bobby Thomas, smooth Bobby Thomas, laughing at Mel Tucker, who's going to be the coach for the Eagles there. Thanks so much, everyone, for hanging out with us. Erik, you stay safe and you stay warm over there, my friend. Everybody have a really nice holiday. Monday, we'll be back here next week with more NFL Betting Blitz.